Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, World Alternative Media here, and we are joined by Edward Stringham. And I mean, you've put a lot of work into this organization. I want you to go into the American Institute for Economic Research and what you guys do.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I'm a college professor. In addition, I am the president of American Institute for Economic Research. We're founded in 1933 by E.C. Harwood, who was friends with Friedrich Hayek, Henry Hazlitt, and he was a strong advocate of things like sound money. He was interested in how government intervention in the money supply can lead to fluctuations in the business cycle. So he basically said we should not be relying on government for money, and so he would say gold, that's really what we should be interested in. So gold was one of his interests, and then just broadly free markets in general. So we're a not-for-profit to educate Americans about the importance of economics.
Absolutely, and it's so important nowadays because most people don't even know what money is. You say, what is money? And someone says, and you say, what are free markets? And someone goes, you know, a somewhat regulated something. No, you know, you try to get this point across to people and they just don't understand, which is okay because I understand where that's coming from. It's made complicated on purpose, but it isn't complicated. The basics of economics and the basics of the markets are quite simple. In your opinion, do you need government at all in the markets?
I think that markets solve problems on their own, and supply and demand is simply just peaceful voluntary interaction between private individuals. So when there's buyers and sellers and they can get together and find ways to cooperate. My own research, here it is.
Plug the book.
Private Governance with Oxford University Press. I go through history and find plenty of examples, private rules and regulations that underpin markets. So a lot of times people assume government is creating order in markets, and in reality it's being created privately.
Well, isn't it interesting that we see a lot of people, especially on the left, that will say things along the lines of, well, I can't stand monopolies, but I need government to stop the monopolies, when in the meantime the government is creating the monopolies through taxation, through subsidization, through regulation. I mean, it just seems so Hegelian. It just goes problem, reaction, solution, repeat. And one thing that really interests me is the healthcare system, because it's so controversial to talk about. They say you're pushing granny down the stairs. However, when you put money into the healthcare system via the state, you extort people, you put money into it, you inflate the prices of the medicine perpetually. You'll always need more and more to provide so-called free healthcare. And trust me, I know I'm from Canada, and this so-called free healthcare means a 12-hour wait in the waiting room, and then finally 9 months later you might be able to get your MRI that you desperately need. And then at that point it could be too late and you're dead. I mean, if we're going to be talking about, you know, caring for other people, shouldn't we be talking about how individuals can, you know, manipulate the market with their dollar, with the demand of their currency, and, you know, the fact that these companies, in order to innovate, they first need to be able to compete in the market, have incentive to actually beat out the other competition, and therefore more employment, more higher wages, and et cetera, et cetera. What do we need to do to educate people about this incredibly important issue, which is literally killing people when you look at things like the healthcare system?
Yes, so competition is actually cooperation. Competition is having businesses seek out consumers and saying, how can I best serve you? If I'm not going to best serve you, I'm not going to be in this marketplace for long. And the companies that are helping people more are rewarded in the marketplace. So competition is a very great form of peaceful interaction, people figuring out ways to better serve each other. And I would say that's true in every single industry. You go into the grocery store and you can get whatever you want because there's tons of farmers and tons of food companies and tons of supermarkets providing for us. It's the areas where you have monopoly where you see worse service. So things like the DMV or, you know, the subway system, where it's like, okay, we're the only game in town. And to move a formerly competitive system healthcare into more bureaucratic and more single-payer, more monopolistic system. You're removing this incentive system where the people who serve better get rewarded better. You take that disconnect away and you got a bunch of bureaucrats saying, whatever, I don't care.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just comes down to trying to get people to understand the difference between, you know, these evil capitalists that they see in the media, which are not actually capitalists. They're usually the corporatist government, you know, initiation of force, where, you know, the difference between capitalism and corporatism is literally opposite ends of the spectrum, where capitalism is just a garage sale, a flea market, a farmer's market. That's what we have left anyway of true, real capitalism today. And corporatism is literally government intervention, political intervention into the system, and therefore manipulating that system from within. I mean, why do we still have to explain this? When someone goes to the store and they exchange money for, say, a chocolate bar, why is that evil?
Oh, it's not evil. It's actually great. We should be, I say, thanking business every time I buy something. I didn't produce it, and so I have to send that person a thank you note, and I figured out the name of this thank you note. It's called $1, and I give that to the merchant and say, thank you so much for producing this for me or giving this to me. So that's great. Now, once you eliminate markets from the system, once you introduce government, and including government-mandated private monopolies, it removes all those incentives. So you, in many cases, see a private company given a government monopoly, government-sanctioned monopoly, and you can take a picture of that entity and say, looks like a private entity, it looks like a company, and people say, oh, you know, that's bad, it must be, you know, big business is bad, therefore markets are bad. In many cases, because of government cronyism has given that company that contract or that monopolistic privilege. So we kind of need to get out of this mindset of government's always there to help us. It's really markets and competition and free entry that allow people to compete and cooperate in any way that they want.
And I mean, the monetary system is a form of market, but it isn't the market. I mean, people often mix up the market and the monetary system as the same thing, which shows a large level of ignorance that we can expect from a society where most schooling is Marxist kind of, you know, indoctrination camps, for lack of a better word. But I mean, we look at these things like these derivatives, we watch the amount of manipulation in every market, including gold and silver, which is wealth insurance, where all these ETFs are printed, and we end up with banks like Deutsche Bank and all these other banks that are sanctioned by the state and work with alongside the state, just jacking up the prices and jacking down the prices and manipulating, making a bull market bear and a bear market bull, because they want to make a few dollars off of insurance rather than an investment. And we just see this across the board, and I can't help but think of also in the monetary system, the Federal Reserve. So can you go into a bit about why we should get out of this system of fiat central planning?
Sure. So I agree with almost everything you said. Not exactly about manipulation by private actors, but when you get in a large player involved, like the government, that can inflate the currency, they have the ability to destabilize. And it hasn't happened just once or twice. It's happened over and over and over again throughout history. The current chairwoman of the Federal Reserve, Janet Yellen, recently said, don't worry, we've had all these problems in the past, but we will never have another economic fluctuation ever again. And this is just this conceit that government is here to stabilize the economy. In many cases, I would argue that they are the ones destabilizing the economy. So once you allow government to print money out of thin air, that will change relative prices. In many cases, it might push interest rates down. That can lead to overinvestment in certain goods like housing or other types of factories. And once you have changes in the real economy based on government printing money, you can actually have an economic fluctuation. So the founder of my institute, American Institute for Economic Research, E.C. Harwood, he was one of the early contributors to this research to say, look, once you have the Federal Reserve involved in this area, it's going to be highly likely that you're going to see perhaps the Great Depression. He also predicted inflation in the 1970s, when they're like, oh no, don't worry about it. We know what we're doing, when in reality they're tremendously actually destabilizing.
Absolutely, and we're watching this fiat system as some people become more aware of what the monetary system truly is. We watch a lot of these people like at the Davos Forum, the World Economic Forum, and you know, at G20, talking about things like a cashless society. So I'm not talking Bitcoin or anything like that. I'm talking a centrally planned cashless society, and we're watching that start to take hold of the populace in places like India, where they demonetized by 86%, Australia, Sweden, China, and Canada. The M0 in the United States is a little off kilter in the past year. It's I can't really compare the chart in the last year to any former chart. There's something odd going on, and we're watching even 12% of people actually going to banks to see the tellers, and they're going all digital. Now this can be very dangerous in the long run, because we have like the IMF speaking about how they can incorporate the centrally planned cashless system into the special drawing rights, the dying special drawing rights, and how they can use this to basically enslave people to the banks. Now, that might sound like fear-mongering, but I put it this way. If your money's in the bank, it's not yours, it's the bank's. And if your money's always going through the banks, through digital transactions, and you never hold it in your hand, then the bank basically owns your wealth. And I find this is a terrifying thought going forward when we have governments throughout the world that are trying to push into this system. What do you think about that?
Right. So I actually do trust my bank, and I thank them for keeping my money safe. But the problem is, once government has their hands in my bank's vault, then all of a sudden it's not a trustworthy system. So you could have a system where the government is monitoring every possible transaction, and there are actually central bankers who say this is one of the good things. IRS is going to love that. We could maybe start taxing every single transaction. There's so much that they can do when they've got their hands in everything. So there is this historical war on cash, which has been getting ramped up, especially in recent years, and I think it's very troubling. It's a potential for a total loss of privacy, and as you mentioned, when they've got the keys to the vault, then we're not really that secure.
Absolutely, and with legal tender laws, that's what I was kind of getting at, is that these banks don't really have that control, because if it's a centrally planned currency that's only going through the banking system, therefore the government has control over that, because you can't coin different money legally unless you want to go into cryptocurrency, etc. Or some business under the table will take gold for, you know, goods and services, rather than, you know, break the law by taking something that they want to have in exchange for something else, because the government always gets in the way. But you know, talking about poverty and everything, the government always talks about how they want to end poverty, and yet they create the system that creates the most poverty. Imagine how much better of a world we'd live in without the rate of inflation we have today, without the devaluation of the dollar, without the taxation that's a burden on people even at the lowest incomes. This isn't about taxing the rich. The rich are fine. It's about the poor people and the small business owners and the middle class. And I want to see more rich people. You know, and so I think those innovations are needed. We need new medical marvels. We need new cures for diseases that comes from innovation and capitalism. So just finishing it up, how can people, through your organization, find out how to kind of pull away from this system and do the best they can to actually protect their own wealth? Because I like to give solutions, because we could talk all day about all the problems, but the solutions are the most important part. What can people do to stay safe in this very volatile environment?
Yeah, so we're a not-for-profit education research institute, and so we don't give specific advice about where you should be investing your money and when or how you should be investing your money. But personally, I would say be very wary about having your assets tied up in dollar-denominated assets. So whatever you do, don't keep your money under your mattress, because if there's going to be inflation, then you could lose a lot of money about that.
Yeah.
Our founder talked about in the, up until the 70s, it was illegal for Americans to own gold. And so he would be thinking about ways that people could invest in relatively inflation-proof assets. And one of the ones at the time where it happened to be a great set of advice was, maybe you could buy gold mining stocks in South Africa. I personally don't have any of that, but that was a great investment at the time. I'm not saying it's a good investment now, but to be diversified, I would say we shouldn't be putting so much faith in the US dollar. And I personally don't invest in digital currencies as much as my friends, but that's a whole other set of things that people are looking at. Cryptocurrencies as an alternative to say, look, maybe we could rely on this rather than government fiat currencies.
Absolutely. With cryptocurrencies, it shows a loss of faith at the very least in the fiat system, which its time has come. And obviously no one should put money into something that they don't know anything about. People have to do their due diligence. Don't listen to me, don't listen to anyone. Do your work yourself, do your homework, because there can be a lot of catastrophes at the end of that cycle, and I think that diversification is so important, especially today as we're watching the end of a fiat system, because 1024 AD was the first fiat system in China. It's almost been 1,000 years, and since then we've seen hundreds of fiat systems collapse. We've seen hyperinflation hit so many places, moderate inflation that still destroys lives, and we continue to devalue currency and base everything on faith instead of something that has intrinsic value. So I thank you for the work that you do. It's important, and we need to start to teach more people on the outside of a bubble about this kind of about what we are currently facing and what they can do, because in the long run people are going to be happy that they were able to find out before rather than later. I know I've talked to a lot of people from the dot-com bubble, a lot of people from the recession in 2007, 2008. I've talked to so many people that wished they had this information earlier so that they could do their due diligence and do things for themselves. So you do great work at
American Institute for Economic Research.
Yeah, it's a long name, but it is truly great work, and I want people to definitely check out your book, Private Governance. Edward Stringham, check it out online. A lot of great reviews on the back of the book, including Judge Napolitano, who is an incredible person, Walter Block, and many others. So I thank you for talking with us today.
All right, great. Thanks so much. Cheers.
Like what we do here at WAM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so vastly demonetized and censored by YouTube. Also check our Bitcoin address in the description and the comments, as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also find me at Josh Sigurdson at steemit.com. That's steemit.com. The future of social media, where you get paid in cryptocurrency to blog and post. Until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.